Hello friends! You know, I want to say this is all the fabric I own, but that's a lie. There's more. There's a big bolt of fake fur right there. There's another bag there. There's an IKEA bag right there out of shot that I just can't be bothered to move. There's the bag of scraps left over from making Hoa's coat. There's the big bag of scraps next door left over from the 2-week run up to the Red Genesis finale. There's a big pile of clothes that I am going to cut up and refashion. There's probably more. There's probably more lurking somewhere in this house. This is going to be 2 videos. The first video is going to be the short, useful one, and the second video is going to be the long, rambling, kind of unhelpful one. In the first video, I'm going to talk about why this is a problem and what we do about it. And in the second video, I'm literally going to sit and go through the pile and talk about all the stuff in here. Gonna be honest, I'm slightly dreading that, which is a good indication as to why the first video, why this is a problem, is very much needed. I imagine a lot of people are looking at this person-sized heap of raw materials and going, I don't see that this is a problem. For context, I have owned some of these pieces of fabric for over 13 years. And I've never made anything with them. I have moved house 9 times in those 13 years, and I've never done anything with them. I started out sewing for dolls, which I did for several years. Then I got into cosplay, which I also did for several years. Then I got into historical costume, which I also did for several years. And then over the last 3 or 4 years, I've been doing LARP. And in all of that time, there are pieces of fabric in here that I have never used. Not only that, I am 100% certain there are pieces of fabric in here that I've forgotten I ever bought. All in all, this pile probably represents thousands of pounds worth of investment that is now wasted because it's never become anything. This is not good. It's very popular and fashionable in crafting circles to act like buying more supplies and stockpiling them is a good thing, that having a big stash is good, that for whatever reason this state of affairs is not only positive but desirable. I just strongly disagree. The point of a stash is supposed to be that when you need to make a project at short notice, you have stuff on hand to do it. Equally, you can build stuff up as you're planning ahead, and thus you have the materials for the 3 or 4 next projects ready to go. This is something that really paid off for me in the short period of time just gone. I had about 2 weeks to make all of my kit for the Genesis finale, and I had 0 budget. Because of all of the stuff that I had accumulated, I could do that. I had just enough stuff lying around in the right colours, in the right lengths, that I could make 5 outfits. And as you can see, that has not even put a dent into this stuff. But that also comes at a cost. That cost is the space it takes up in my life, the space it takes up in my brain, the actual money that I have sunk into all of this, which, let's be honest, I am never getting back. There was a point during that 2-week Regenesis rush where I was pretty certain that I couldn't make one of the outfits that I'd envisioned because there just wasn't any fabric suitable. I had originally made this character a blue brocade coat. I wanted to make the same coat but in a dark navy or black patterned fabric. I didn't have any black or navy patterned fabric in a big enough quantity to make a full-length coat, therefore there's no way it could possibly happen. And then I found this stuff, and on the one hand, hurrah, problem solved. I had 5 meters of a black wool check with reflective gold stripes. It was perfect. I had more than enough to make the thing. The coat looked amazing. Life was good. But here's the flip side of this. I bought this fabric less than a year ago, and I'd forgotten that it existed. This fabric wasn't in a box, it wasn't at the bottom of a pile, it was in amongst a whole bunch of folded cuts of fabric that I'd had floating around for about a year. I had been moving this pile of fabric on and off boxes for almost a year, looking for other things, hunting out other stuff. I had passed this fabric over so many times because I had forgotten it existed. I almost didn't make that coat because I no longer remembered what I own. At the point that you don't remember what you own, you can't use it, you can't appreciate it, it's dead to you. I had a pretty significant turning point a few years ago where I sat and looked at all of the stuff that I'd accumulated. And yes, at one point there was more. Spoilers, this next bit's really grim. I suddenly had a vision of my friends and family having to go through this after I'd died. And the only thing I could think was of people opening these boxes and going, how incredibly sad they never used this stuff. It's even falling on me now. So this is where I'm at. This whole thing, this is not good. This is not happy making. This is at best stuff I've forgotten, and at worst stuff that is deeply tragic. And it's just weighing me down, right? There is no point in me having all this stuff. Anyway, the subject of this video is going to be, what do you do? What do you do with all this stuff? I'm going to talk about how I'm going to decide what to keep and what to get rid of, what getting rid of fabric looks like and the choices that you make along those lines. I'm also going to talk about what I'm going to do going forwards, both in terms of practicalities, so storage, but also in a more abstract sense, how I'm going to change my buying and acquiring habits going forwards, how you can approach buying fabric in a way that is healthy and practical. Because the big thing no one ever really wants to talk about is that this is not healthy. This is hoarding. And being able to recognize that and move on from it is a big deal. This is the part of the video where I alienate 50% of my audience because we're going to talk about Marie Kondo. I'm not going to explain Marie Kondo for the 16th billionth time because I assume that if you haven't heard about it, you are capable of looking that up. What I am going to say is that the art of tidying up was a big deal for me. It framed the discussion of owning stuff in a way that pointed out how incredibly unhealthy the way that I was doing it currently was, and offered a really positive way to move forward. The whole point is that you don't worry about what you're getting rid of. You concentrate on what you actually like and what makes you happy. And this is the big problem with a lot of this stuff here, is that if I've forgotten it exists, if I no longer want to make the project that I bought it for, if I have no idea what I'm going to do with it, that's not making me happy. It is in fact doing the opposite of that. My takeaway from all of Marie Kondo's work is that you don't need to own things that you don't need or have strong feelings about. I don't need 12 boxes of fabric, so I should only be keeping the ones that I have strong feelings about, the ones that I pick up and like. I am really excited to work with this. There was an incredible project idea that I had that I really want to do. I can absolutely see myself making some generic LARP kit out of this that's going to be really, really useful. I can see myself making clothes for myself that I'm going to wear all the time. If you're picking stuff up and going, this is beautiful, but I have no idea what I'm going to do with it, why are you keeping that in your life? It's just going to take up space. And if it helps to think about it this way, getting rid of all the stuff that you're not excited about means you can then go out and buy stuff that you are excited about, if that's the kind of situation that you're in. So, first pass is to go through literally everything here, decide whether or not it's going to stay. Remember I said there was going to be 2 videos? The second video is going to be basically just me doing that. I have no idea how long this thing is going to end up being, probably horrific, but my guilty secret is that I really enjoy watching people go through their fabric stashes and talk about stuff, so I'm gonna do it and you don't have to watch that one if you don't want to. For example, this is what I have left over from that Regenesis project. There's quite a bit of it. I loved working with it. It's really nice. It's wool. It's quite smart. Not only really enjoy it and now have really good associations with this fabric, but I think that I could make myself a skirt or maybe even a dress. Small dress, but a dress that I could wear day to day. That's very easy. I'm going to hang on to it, and I have a specific project in mind. That one stays. This packet here is some stuff I bought at the beginning of the year. It's silk satin. It was bought with a specific character in mind. I'm confident that I'm going to keep playing that character long enough to use these in their kit, and if not, big cuts of silk satin are never going to go amiss. I will find something to do with them. They're in nice, good, dark colours that I wear a lot of. Worst case scenario, I'll make something for myself out of them. So again, nice and practical. They can stay. Random piece of baby blue pleather. I was about to say, why do I even have this? I can tell you why I have this. When I was 19, I didn't have a doll carry bag yet, so I bought this and lined it with felt weight interfacing and made a carrying bag for fancy dolls so I could take them to conventions. It was a terrible carry bag, which is why I stopped using it and took it apart and saved the fabric. Realistically, am I ever going to use some randomly shaped bits of baby blue pleather? Probably not. Is there any kind of useful modern day clothes, generic LARP kit, random household items that I could make from this that I would enjoy and would be useful? I'm drawing a blank. I've cut a chunk out of it, so at some point I had a use for something, and I'm willing to bet it was just reinforcing another piece of kit. Do I have nice memories of it? Kind of. Does it need to stay in my life? Nah. To this I say thank you and goodbye. That is basically what I'm going to have to do for every single thing here. Every box, every bag, everything. Go through every piece of fabric one by one. I do think it's worth actually following through and doing the thing where you hold every single thing in your hands and properly think about it. If you find yourself in the position where you like something, you aren't sure if you'd ever use it, you aren't really excited by it, interested in it, it just seems like a thing that you should keep because it might be useful, put those in their own pile to go back to, because once you know how big that pile of random bits of cotton that you could use as mock-up material, if it turns out that you have 40 meters of random cotton to use as mock-up material, you don't need all of that. You should probably get rid of some of it. So that is step one. Does it stay? Step two is then figuring out what you do with the two piles that you've made, the stuff that is staying and the stuff that is not. We're going to talk about the stuff that is staying first. You've got fabrics that you love, that you're excited to use. You're going to need to store those somehow. The automatic reaction is like, oh yes, we'll do something like this. We'll keep everything in plastic totes or something where it's safe and protected, and no. Don't do that. These boxes seemed like a really, really good idea at the time, and having lived with some of them for 10 years, these are terrible. This is an awful, awful idea. One, stuff gets lost in there. Because they're see-through, you think that you can see everything that's in them. You just can't. Two, you have to stack them, so the ones in the top will get gone into a lot, and the ones that are at the bottom, if you have enough fabric, won't. Number three, people really recommend these on the idea that you can keep like clothes moths out and protect your fabric from sun damage. As I said, after nearly 10 years of using them, those are both lies. I have had fabric moths inside these boxes. They don't seal properly, and I'm not convinced that the fabric's got any less sun damage than they would have if they'd been just stored in a shady place anyway. And if I'm completely honest, you shouldn't have fabric long enough that it gets sun damaged from being in storage. I have some details to work out still. I'm planning on converting a lot of the craft room, which is currently mostly boxes and nonsense, into IKEA Kallax units, the very simple square units that you can slot boxes or drawers or whatever into. And at that point, the remaining fabric will get probably wound onto cardboard bolts and stacked up in those spaces so that I can see at a glance everything that I have. As a tangent, if you've ever seen Adam Savage's workshop tour, he has all of his tools and all of his supplies out in the open where you can see them. So it's a concept called first order retrievability. That is absolutely what I want to do, certainly for my tools, but also for the fabric. I need to be able to see at a glance what I've got. So when I'm ready to start a new project, I immediately know whether I have the fabric already and I'm not buying stuff, having forgotten about things already in my stash, or duplicating things I already could have used. Then there's what you do with the stuff that you don't want anymore and that you don't want to keep. It's probably a good idea to research what your options are. Depending on your area and what's available to you, you might have slightly different priorities than from what I'm doing. At the bottom of the pile, in general, I would say be very cautious about throwing things away. Natural fibers like cotton, silk, wool eventually, and I think even rayon will break down over time. However, polyesters and nylons and other synthetic materials, they are basically plastic, which means that they are here for good. If you bury them in the ground, they will still be here hundreds of years from now. Fun fact, every time you wash polyester clothing, tiny microplastics end up in the water supply. And yet, everyone hates glitter. And not that. In the area that I live, general waste doesn't go into landfill, they incinerate it for electricity. I've done some research into how the plants work, and obviously because they're breaking down a lot of toxic stuff, their air filtering is quite good and the emissions of that are pretty low. So worst case scenario, if I do end up throwing stuff away that would otherwise go into landfill, I'm okay with that, but I'd rather stuff went to a place where they were used. If you have a charity shop or thrift shop that regularly stocks fabric, that's probably a good place to donate stuff to. A lot of charity shops don't know what to do with it and won't stock it for sale. So even though you've donated it, it may still end up in landfill or being sent overseas further down the line. Believe it or not, just because you donate something to a charity shop doesn't mean that it's going to then get sold in a charity shop. These things are not always terribly transparent, and I think it's important to do your research on what actually happens. In particular, if you don't have nice, large, unused pieces of useful fabric, you should probably assume that that doesn't have any resale value and therefore might end up in landfill, in which case it's probably better that you make that call based on the options that you have. If you are a LARPer or know LARPers or are otherwise associated with other people who do crafts, you'll probably find that your friends are very keen to take things off your hands. If you're putting all the effort of getting your life in order and getting rid of all of your garbage, don't get rid of it by making it other people's problems. A lot of people will feel obligated to keep gifts that they have been given, even if they're not actually going to use it. Concentrate on your friends who are learning how to sew and will use anything that you can get, your friends who are students or otherwise may not be able to buy their own fabric, and then let people choose what they want to take, because then it's something that they're happy with and they're going to healthily incorporate into their lives. As an extension from that, there are also always schools, colleges, fashion courses, and other people who may have use even sometimes for quite small scraps of fabric. And if you do have nice big cuts of nice fabrics that you've never used and are in very good condition, you can also look at selling those on. Personally, I have a lot of complicated feelings about contributing to the massive carbon footprint of the fashion industry. Buying secondhand fabric is something I do all the time, and the pieces of fabric that I just showed you, the wool check and then the 2 pieces of silk satin, they were both bought secondhand from someone else clearing out their stash. This stuff circulates. You're not going to make a lot of money, but it is going to end up in the hands of people like me who will use it and will appreciate it. Those are some of your options for getting rid of stuff. There are probably more. If you think of some that I've forgotten, please leave them in the comments. I love how the standard YouTube comment indicator is just to kind of gesture down towards the bottom of the screen somehow. One final thing on keeping stuff and getting rid of stuff. Little scraps of fabric, get rid of them. In general, I'm not going to tell you what to do with your stuff, but if you have pieces of fabric smaller than about 8 inches by 8 inches, just throw them away. You're never going to learn quilting. You're never going to start doing patchwork unless you have a specific project involving scraps of fabric in mind. Get rid of them. Unless your friends have specifically asked. Do not give your friends tiny scraps of fabric. Nobody wants pieces of crappy cotton that are this big and a weird shape. They just don't, I promise you. That is like one of my all-time pet peeves, is people who just have bin bags and bin bags full of tiny fabric scraps that are unusable. It's fine. The massive carbon footprint of the fashion industry comes from people like Wish and Primark and fast fashion retailers who produce huge quantities of very, very cheap clothes, most of which are thrown away after 1 or even no uses. It's not home sewers getting rid of tiny scraps. Just throw away your leftovers. It's not worth it. Your house and your peace of mind will thank me. Which moves us on to the final thing that I want to say, which is, once you've gone through your stash, once you've got all the things that you want to keep organised in a way that you can see and use them, and you've got all the things that you don't want to keep happily moved on to new homes, what do we do different going forwards? For me, the whole point of this is so that I'm in a position to use what I have. By having my fabric all really clearly displayed, the next time I start a new system, I have to make a new character, I'm going to be able to immediately go, okay, this is what my costume brief is, let us look for fabric, and it will be easy and straightforward and I'm not going to miss things. As opposed to what I've done in the past, which is go, okay, this is my brief, this is what I want to make, so obviously I must now immediately buy fabric. Someone who's been sewing a lot longer than I have once turned to me and said, I couldn't possibly work through my stash at the rate at which you're suggesting, because I have costume briefs to work to which my response was, no, so does everyone. When you have this quantity of fabric, trust me, you're going to have something that fits the brief. And if you don't, why do you have this fabric? Anyway, digression. The other thing I want to do loads more of is sewing for myself. I am a somewhat unusual shape and have a somewhat atypical way of presenting myself. I could really do with more clothes that really fit me, both physically and as a person. And so I'm going to be making an effort to work through a lot of my stash instead of buying new clothes. Something that I've been trying to do for a while, but I think that I'm going to really double down on, is the idea of having a nil gain stash. You're allowed to buy stuff, but the overall size of the fabric stash can't increase. If I need to buy 5 meters of black linen for this next project and there's just nothing suitable in what I have, that's okay, but I've got to use up 5 meters from the stash somewhere, and that might be finally making that one 1940s blouse pattern that I've had my eye on for ages, maybe a couple of skirts or a pair of trousers, or it might be pulling out 5 meters of brocade and making a generic LARP gown that will come in handy at some point. Or if it can't, maybe I'll make it a different size and give it to one of my friends. I don't know yet. There's going to be that pressure to get stuff moving through the fabric stash and out of the fabric stash. And that way, hopefully, we do not end up in the position again where I'm looking at things and going, I have owned you for 13 years through however many different houses. Why are you still here? And I think that's pretty much it for this video. I hope this has been useful. If you want to join me for a long rambling exploration of this enormous pile of garbage, that will probably be coming up either in a few days or next week, depending on how the hell I do this. That's going to be a long, weird and very, very silly video, and I suspect I will end up basically going mad during it, but who knows? Don't forget to like, comment and subscribe. And as you may know, I now have a Ko-fi page. I'm going with Ko-fi today Ko-fi is a platform that lets you make a one-off donation to support someone's work, so if you've enjoyed the videos and want to chuck £3 in a hat, that would be amazing. This video would not have been possible without the kind donations of my Ko-fi supporters, because I'm filming it on a 64GB SD card, having previously had to use a 4GB SD card and go to the computer every 20 minutes of footage. So thank you, you have genuinely made this monstrosity possible. That's everything for today, and I will see you